pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And may we have roll call, please?
Deputy Mayor Rose Clark,
Here.
and Council Members Jack Lott Jr.,
Here.
Bob Edgar,
Here.
Lucy Krokoviac,
Here.
Gerald F. Robinson.
Here.
And Mayor Bennett and Councilmember John McGilton are excused from tonight's council meeting. And so I would need a motion for agenda confirmation.
I move agenda confirmation.
And under our regular
We have a
rules,
second.
Jack Lott would be the seconder.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to confirm the agenda. All in favor, please register your vote. Thank you. It passes unanimously. Now is time for public comment, and we have 3 people who have signed up. We have Good Space Guy, followed by John Fortress, followed by Rachel Levine. So come over here, please.
I'm sorry to say this, so don't get interrupted. Guten Abend. Es freut mich hier wieder zu sein. Ich heiße Good Space Guy, and I'll now switch to English so I can be understood, even though English is not the official language of Burien. There's a lot of misery in Burien caused by unemployment. So with the current businesses in Burien, the current businesses with the cost structure and tax structure and regulations, when we look at Burien right now, we can see what percentage of the population can be employed. So there's a lot of people in Burien who are not employed and can't be employed because the cost structure, tax structure, regulation structure does not allow them to be employed. I don't know what the number of employed people in Burien is, but that, for economic development of Burien, that would be an interesting statistics to know what people, what number of people in Burien are actually employed, or the full-time equivalent. So what is the full-time equivalent of employed people in Burien? And what percentage is that of the population of Burien? So that would be a nice statistic to follow from over time to see how the full-time equivalent employment in Burien, what percentage of the population that is of Burien. Now the reason the cost structure is so high is because of the minimum wage. As an amateur economist, I've mentioned this before, and so the minimum wage prevents many people from being hired because businesses have to make a profit, and so they look at their revenues, they look at their total costs, and when they subtract their total costs from the revenues, some of them are really struggling. And it's normal for businesses to go out of business and be replaced by better managed businesses that are more in tune with the consumer demands. So when we put unnecessary burdens on businesses, such as the minimum wage, we really harm a community. So to improve the economic development in Burien, I would recommend that Burien consider whether or not I'm telling the truth, that the minimum wage really makes many people in Burien unemployable and consequently increases the crime rate in Burien and the need for more police protection. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. John Fortress.
John Poitras. I live at
Southwest 149th and Burien. I'm here to speak on 3 issues. One, annexation failed by a considerable margin, over 2,000 votes. It's interesting that the previous annexation of Area X, as it was referred to, had less than half the votes, less than half the number of people voted, and it won by 276 votes. The latest annexation, which had more than twice as many people voting, failed by a couple of thousand votes. So it would be interesting to see if, instead of having held that election in August, was held in November, what the result would have been. At any rate, I have sent a letter to the council requesting publication of how much money the city of Burien spent on promoting annexation, and I think we have the right to know that. The second subject is the proposal to take Town Square and put high-density apartments in there. I think the vast majority of Burien residents are completely opposed to this. Is this working? Completely opposed to this. Certainly, there is pressure from the developer to get this off their hands, but I sincerely want to say to the council that anyone that votes for this, you will have to pay the price come next November, because we will certainly use that as a reason not to be seen acting for the best benefit of Burien. It's not. The third subject I wanted to talk on was the rezoning of North Highline. Now, one of the reasons we were given for the annexation of White Center was so that Burien could control the zoning, and King County would not come in and put a lot of high-density housing in there. Now I read in the Highline Times that Herondale Council is considering doing exactly what they were afraid of King County doing to North Highline. This seems to be ridiculous to me. Maybe I misunderstood it, but the area west of Amblon to rezone it for high-density housing, this does not seem to be something that would be in the best benefit of Burien either. So I strongly suggest that you consider this before voting for that. Thank you.
And Rachel Levine.
My name is Rachel Levine, and I live at 430 South 124th Street, Burien. And I am in the annexed area, the most recently annexed area to Burien. And I thank the Burien Council for representing me in my area X as much as anyone else in this area. I came here tonight to thank the members of this council who, with me and others, shared a concern that the 2 libraries in North Highline would realize the benefits to the community for which we voted in 2004. And that was to upgrade the Boulevard Park Library and build a new library in the White Center area, if not right on that lot, in that particular place, at least very close to the center of White Center. From the very beginning, this council, for the most part, was looking after the people in our area to make sure that we maintain those libraries, because it was very clear that the King County Library System wished to consolidate those 2 libraries. And finally, after much struggle with many people attending meetings all the way from here to North Bend, we made it possible for the board, the King County Library Board, to make a decision to put their decision about this consolidation, to hold that until after annexation. The annexation failed, but as far as that is concerned, the one good thing coming out of that, as far as I'm concerned, is that the King County Library Board has now said they've got 3 options. One, there are more than 3 options, but one is they're gonna maintain the Boulevard Park Library where it is. And the second is that in terms of building a new library, Mr. Potasic said there are 3 options to build where we are right now on that property, to move a little north or a little south. Those are still their options, but there is not an option now to consolidate. And they are planning to go ahead with a library as far as we know. So I do want to thank the members of this council who have stuck with us from the very beginning, who've gone to the meetings, have spoken, who have been with us in protecting our libraries. For those who did not wish to help us in that regard, I would think that that would be I would think that that would be something that they would not be particularly pleased about, because as it turns out, we are going to get our new library, as far as I know. And we'll hope that the leadership, the next leadership for the King County Library System will be as firm in making sure that we have that library in White Center as they have for all the other libraries and all the other parking lots that have been funded by our tax dollars. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would wish to speak? Okay, seeing no one, I will close public comment. And now we have correspondence for the record. We have a few letters. They are in the packet.
Amendments in rezones. This is an effort to update our comprehensive plan to be consistent with the Growth Management Act, Vision 2040, and countywide planning policies. The proposed amendments to the council followed an extensive process with the Planning Commission, which included 18 public meetings with the commission, 2 open houses that we held in the North Burien area, and 2 public hearings. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended what you find in the proposed November 5th version of the Ordinance 573. At your November 5th meeting, City Council requested staff prepare a matrix for you, capturing your comments, questions, and concerns. And we have prepared that matrix, and you can see that as attachment 1. The one thing I want to point out in the matrix is that we did use the packet from November 5th as reference, because that was quite a sizable packet, so staff appreciates that, because that's quite a piece of material to reproduce. So the purpose of the meeting tonight is to provide those responses which we have in the matrix, receive additional questions or comments, and then for the staff to receive any direction the council may choose on any of those items. So the simplest way to maybe break down the chart is it can be broken into different sections. The first topic is the public notice. There was an extensive discussion at the last meeting about providing individualized notice to property owners where their zoning has changed. So what we're looking for from the council tonight is a timeline on that process. The soonest that we could accomplish that would be for your December 17th meeting. The other option would be at some time in early January. So we would like to hear from you on that. We've identified 200 parcels that will change. That's out of a total of approximately 4,000 in the area. So roughly, rough math is about 0.5% of the total parcels, just parcels.
So we're not going to ask you to make decisions on any of these tonight unless you care to do that, but on this particular item, we need to prepare for a public hearing that we assume that you'll want. And the question is, do you want it before or after the holidays? And that's important because we will be sending out notices to all properties, all owners of properties that will be upgraded or downzoned, upzoned or downzoned as a result of the recommendations. So if we could get your direction on that, that would be helpful.
Councilmember Edgar.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. If we were to have a hearing, what would happen during that hearing, the public hearing?
You would receive comments on the proposed changes and the proposed land use designations in Ordinance 573.
Okay, so this would be separate from sending out notices to the affected property owners?
No, the idea would be that we would send out the notices prior to the public hearing. That's why the timing is important, because we want those people to be able to come to the council and speak to you about the changes to their properties.
So then the question I have is, in a public meeting, and if all 200 people showed up and they had a concern about the downzoning, would that public hearing preclude them from any further legal action to affect their property if they wanted to contest the downzoning?
Legal action.
No, it wouldn't. In fact, they'd probably have to do that if they wanted to contest the downzoning.
Councilmember Krokoviac.
Thank you. I would support having the individual notices sent out and a public hearing following that in January or February, letting people celebrate the holidays, and in January giving them time to sort through their mail and actually understand what the impacts might be. Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
Yes, I agree with Councilmember Kobe. I think with the holidays coming up, people are going to be distracted, and it would be better if the notices went out. Send them out sometime in December for a public hearing sometime after January 14th, so that people have at least a couple weeks after the holidays and they have some time to look at it and consider the impact. And I would also urge that the notice should inform people that they can respond in writing or by an email or something, so that people don't think they have to wait for the public hearing and then show up in person. A lot of times it's nice to get those comments in advance so we can start thinking about them before we ever get to the public hearing.
Yeah, we have drafted an early version of the letter, and those items are included. So you can either do it via writing or via email.
Okay, and for Councilmember Edgar's comment, like Craig said, if you want to pursue a further appeal after the city's taken action, you have to participate in the administrative process.
So I would agree to having it in January, because then we'll have all of our council members back.
Okay, so we'll plan on that then, and we will time the notices to go out a couple of weeks prior to that.
So on that, I had pressed my button.
I see that.
Thank you. So rather than sending the notice out in December for January, if we could send it out at the very beginning of January, so that the amount of mail that's in people's mailboxes in December is amazing. So if we can really make sure that it's on the top of the stack that people get. Thank you.
I would concur
It's
with
a
that.
couple of weeks before the hearing.
If council has a specific date they'd like to send out, we're glad to do that.
Don't we customarily do that a couple of weeks prior to?
That's correct.
So we have an established kind of framework that we take these actions in.
Yeah, typically it's 14 days prior to the hearing, but you can always go earlier. You can certainly mail earlier. So yeah, looking at the calendar, I think 14th was a date, well, there's 3 meetings, the 14th, the 7th, the 14th, and the 28th, so it's sounding like the 28th might be the preferred option.
And then would you like us then to send out on the 14th, is that what I'm hearing?
7th or 14th.
Send it out no later than the 14th.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
So, yes, continuing on, yes.
And I just wanted to point out, we just needed a pause on that particular one. We didn't, and that was when we just needed direction on the rest of these. David will tell you about, but we don't need action tonight.
Okay, excuse me one moment, David, Councilmember Edwards.
Thank you. Okay, I want to readdress my question a little bit differently. At the end of the meeting, the public hearing that we have, will the council have some action to take place, such as making changes to the zoning? Or is that already cast in stone and individual people will need to come and make those requests? I want to get a sense of what.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to describe the process. So where we're at in the process right now is we have a proposed ordinance that includes some zoning changes. What I'm hearing is that we're going to have a public hearing where the council will consider that testimony, and then you're free. Then we probably will have further discussion, and if the council so chooses, you could amend the proposed ordinance, which contains maps. But there's other considerations that will certainly need to be taken into account. But you do have the potential to amend the maps, just as like we're looking at amending some of the text.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that was understood. What
Yeah.
actions were responsibilities.
Yeah, and the council is in control of the timing, so you can act whenever the council feels it's appropriate. There's nothing that's driven by statute here.
Okay, seeing no more lights, you can continue.
So the next kind of topic area is suggested changes. We heard a number of suggested changes to the text, and there's approximately 8 of those. I've basically just captured those in the matrix. Those are items 2 through 9, and I've added some comment from staff on those text changes. So ultimately, similar to Councilmember Edgar's question, is ultimately the council should give us direction on what the final ordinance, or at least come to a consensus on what the final ordinance would include. Then the council would take action on that. The next section, there was 4 questions, which either we answered at the last meeting, and I just, again, used the matrix to capture those questions. That is on page, it's 51, thank you. And then finally, there were 2 comments, and I just wanted to, again, capture the comments. That's the final 2 items. So we're here to aid in your discussion. And if there's any items you'd like to add to the matrix, we're happy to add those and provide responses at future meetings.
So that we have an orderly process, shall we proceed through this one numerical number at a time then? Okay, I have Councilmember Krakowiak. Oh, excuse me, Councilmember Robeson was first.
So, I think we're gonna go through the things on the matrix one at a time?
Yes, in the order listed.
Okay, so starting with item number 1 we've already discussed, so starting with item number 2.
Right.
And I understand the response from staff, but I don't agree with it. I feel that this move, and this is changing kind of the thrust of the code from saying if you want to do something in the city, you have to prove that it's going to benefit the community, to a standard of saying, well, if you want to do something in the city, you just have to prove it's not going to hurt the city or to hurt the community. And I think that the first approach, what's the current approach apparently, is a little too restrictive and puts maybe too much of a constraint on progress in the city, and that we could get more action, more things done if we took a standard that said, okay, we want to have things happen here, we want businesses to come in, we want things to happen as long as they don't harm the city, rather than saying, well, we don't want you here unless you can prove that you're going to help the city. That's my comment on that.
Okay, Councilmember Andrew.
Thank you. I would agree with that. The assumption that the community is content with the status quo and only positive gains will be to essentially emphasize. I think it's a harder and more restrictive standard to meet. In essence, a valid change should not be denied if it does no harm to the status quo. It may not necessarily advance, but it doesn't do any negative harm. And so that's why I'm also in favor of the resulting in a no net loss or net loss to the city.
Councilmember Krokoviac.
Thank you. And I too agree with shifting the wording so that it reads, it will not result in a net loss to the community. In my perspective, the way that it's worded right now with showing a benefit before the change is approved, if I'm looking at it as a business, that would be deemed as recruitment, and it will not result in a net loss to the community. I'm looking at it more retention, and in this economic time that we're experiencing, I think that retention is where we need to focus. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments? I just have one question. David, is this, the public benefit is original comp plan concepts?
That's correct. This is existing language that isn't proposed to be changed.
So that language has gone through all of the different approval processes and found to be acceptable? Are there other cities that deal with it as a no loss?
And that question I can't answer without doing any research on it, but I can answer is that this is language that we've had for many, many years, and we've applied it in many scenarios through other rezone requests or map change requests.
Okay, so then we have consensus to change to a no loss or no harm. Is that correct?
Well, I think tonight, I understood that we're not taking action.
We're not, but for purposes of the discussion here, that's where the discussion is going.
Thank you.
I hope we have consensus on that. I think there's three of us at least. And I see it not so much as, holding ourselves into what we've done in the past, but as trying to change things to try and break out more.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item 3. Councilmember Krokoviac.
Thank you. I would encourage us as a council to keep the language regarding McMansions in. It's a discussion item. And I know that staff has mentioned that several of the discussion items have been taken out to clean up the document. I think this discussion item helps us with perspective on preserving the character of the neighborhood, and I think that it would serve Burien if it was kept in. Thank you.
And Councilmember Robertson.
I take kind of the opposite view. As the staff noted, we have lot coverage limitations, impermeable surface limitations that constrain how much of your lot you can build on, how big of a house you can build. And I haven't seen a problem around Burien with oversized houses, except maybe the one next to mine. But I don't believe that the city's part of it to pick on necessarily somebody that has the poor taste to build a grossly oversized house on their lot.
Does anybody else have a comment on this? Councilmember Lindbergh.
Yeah, my comment was I think it should remain, specifically the last question, the last sentence in that statement on the discussion. I think needs to be retained somewhere in this section. It may not be a standalone, but it helps at least set a sense of what may happen, what could happen in the future. And if we're looking at future, this might be an issue that we already have addressed or prepared to address.
Do you have enough direction on that one? We seem to be kind of split.
We'll take this into consideration when we bring it back.
Yeah, I think the important thing is this is helpful, but we also will continue to use the matrix, so it won't go helpful probably for the council just to have the discussion in general.
Okay. Item 4. Councilmember Kukoviac.
Thank you. This was something that I noticed, and so thank you for making the changes. The comment on the matrix mentioning the last comment, it says RE 1.5 should not be amended because it is a policy included in the proposed SMP policy, and any changes will make the documents inconsistent. So I did a little research on consistency, and I found from the Growth Management Hearings Board that consistency is in regard to the document itself, and it's not about comparing two documents. So I can submit this to staff if you'd like to see, or I can read it to you tonight, whichever you prefer. So I would like to see RE 1.5 amended to keep our comp plan as correct as possible. Thank you.
Do we have any for Councilmember Edgar?
Yep. I would also support that. I also did some research and found that their Wealth Management Board, which actually reviews the comp plan and makes rulings on situations that people have with their city's comp plan, actually came up with a ruling in August of 2010 that in part says that internal consistency, which is required under the RCW 36.70A.070, involves the consistency between the provisions of one document rather than between two different documents. So I think when we're looking at justifying the need to do something or not do something with the wording in here, because it has to be in concert or consistent with another document, I think the Growth Management Board has already ruled that that's not necessary. The intent should be the same, but it doesn't have to be exactly word for word.
Does anybody else have a comment? Seeing no other lights, let's move on to 5. Councilmember Kukoviac.
Thank you. Quite a few of these are originating from my observations at the last meeting. So commenting on this one, I would like to see the language remain in the document. For myself, as I use these documents as a city council person and also as a citizen, it's much clearer to have it re-emphasized in writing rather than trying to guess what the map says. So I would encourage us to keep the language in. Thank you.
And I would concur with that.
Just as a point of clarification, there are a couple of other portions where there is some verbal description. Would that apply document-wide?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, item 6. Councilmember Robison.
Okay, this is one of the things where on the shoreline management program discussion with the state was one of the sticking points with them, and the decision was made that we don't necessarily have to address that at the moment until somebody comes along and wants to propose some kind of access to the lake. There's no public frontage on the lake at this point, so there's no public access possible. If public access became a possibility, then we could address it at that time. And that was kind of the compromise with the state, is okay, we'll just leave that until such point as public ownership of any of the lakefront comes into being.
Councilmember Edgar.
Thank you. The staff suggested that should physical access be prohibited before the merits of any proposal, good or bad, are analyzed. I would like to suggest that the merits of physical access have already been analyzed. the City of Burien's EIS states on page 5-32 that, where did I go? Bear with me. The development of a water-related commercial use with controlled public access to Lake Burien. Such access would be limited primarily to views and passive recreation, since active recreation would adversely affect water quality. So that has already been done and noted by the EIS that had been conducted by the City of Burien.
And I'm going to support Councilmember Robeson's comment and Councilmember Kukoviac.
Thank you. And I am going to support Councilmember Edgar's comment and ask that we have our comprehensive plan consistent. And so with Chapter 5 and the environmental impact statements stating that controlled public access would be limited primarily to views and passive recreation, that I would encourage us to have it in this section also. Thank you.
Councilmember Edgar.
Yes, I would like to recommend a little bit different wording for that section. While I had suggested that, quote, physical public access to the water is prohibited, I'd like to propose a little different flavor of that, where the total line on page 230 of the 2-30 of the comprehensive plan would read under policy SE 1.3. While the city encourages and supports the continued operation of the center, which is the recycling center, any proposed change in use in the future should be reviewed to ensure that wetlands and water quality of Lake Burien are fully protected. Public access to Lake Burien would be limited primarily to views and passive recreation. And development supports the historical link to Old Burien. And that way the wording is consistent with the wording in the city's EIS in Chapter 5, which is also part of the comprehensive plan. And it meets the consistency ruling of the growth management plan that said all areas of internal documents should be internally consistent.
Councilmember Brock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I have a couple questions. Citation used by Councilmember Edgar referred to commercial properties. Would this apply to private properties also, non-commercial properties?
I think it applies to all, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I was just curious because the citation in the EIS referred to commercial properties. The other question I have is there anything preventing a private landowner from allowing access through their property, either through an easement or some other mechanism? This is a question for the city attorney.
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any provisions in our Shoreline Master Program or the Shoreline Management Act or any land use statutes that would prohibit that.
Okay, so a private landowner, if they chose to, could allow access. So the proposal by Councilmember Edgar, would that alter that ability for a private landowner to give that access if they chose to?
Well, I think one of the things to consider is this is in the, the special planning area 2 land use designation section. This is really actually code or our shoreline master program. It is more of a guidance document. Now that of course informs your regulations, which the city is in the process of working on updating its shoreline master program as well. So I think our comment here is that this type of detail is probably best addressed through the shoreline master program as opposed to a policy statement in the comprehensive plan. So I think that's just some of the context that we should consider when looking at this.
And I would agree with Mr. Johansson's comments, but also in direct response to Councilmember Block's question, I'd have to look more closely at the proposed wording from Councilmember Edgar, but I think it would be ambiguous as to that point. I would interpret it to mean that it's applying to proposals that the city has to approve. So if a private property owner wanted to grant an easement on their own, that would be up to them. I don't think our comp plan or our development regulations would prohibit that unless it was worded more clearly than what this wording is, how it's worded.
David, this only applies to a special planning area, not to the whole entire lake.
That's where this text is found,
Right.
correct?
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Do we have any more comments? Councilmember Edgar.
I would still like to have my proposed change added to the matrix.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Did you get the whole language, or do you?
We'll review
Yeah, we can review
Okay.
the recording.
Okay, and number 8.
You skip number 7.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I can address number 7. So basically, that was an omission on my part, to be honest with you, is the text back in the tables, there was a comment that was to be moved, and I honestly did not include it in the appropriate location, so.
So thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so are you speaking to 8 now?
I'm speaking to,
Well,
correct.
I wanted to just make a comment on 7.
Okay. Go ahead.
And it goes a little beyond what we're doing right now, but the TDRs are something that hasn't been used previously, but it's been available. The county has its land banking program with bank TDRs that we can get access to if we set up the proper ordinance in advance. And I think that we should proceed on that, get that set up so that that's a tool that's available to help with development of the city.
I think my only response is and I can't speak enough in detail, but there was some investigation of a TDR program, but I would have to get back to you on the details of that. But there was some investigation of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that also way back when we were doing the original comp plan. Councilmember Krakowiak.
Thank you. So speaking on number 8.
Yes.
This is just deleting the word attempt to in the phrase, so thank you for the explanation, and I would like to continue to have it edited and simplified so that it reads, avoid impact to critical areas before considering minimizing impacts or providing mitigation. So I think the steps still are included without having extra wording, so thank you.
And Councilmember Edgar.
Thank you. I would like to suggest and support also that we remove the avoid or attempt to at the front end of that. That particular statement comes out of WAC 173-26-201, in which it identifies mitigation measures, and it says mitigation measures shall be applied in the following sequence of steps listed in order of priority, with the first one of this subsection being top priority. A, avoid the impact altogether by not taking a certain action or parts of an action. If there's an attempt to want to mitigate it because you can't meet that, then B says minimize impacts, C says rectify the impact, D, reduce or eliminate the impact, E is compensating the impact, and F is monitoring. So there's already a series of mitigation, and I think by putting attempt to at the front weakens that first one.
Councilmember Rose.
Well, I just wanted to comment that I agree with the staff comment on that.
Okay, and I agree with that also. So let's move to 9. Councilmember Krokoviac.
Thank you. So I think number 9, staff has added that to the policy, and I thank them for adding that. And I think that does it for our requested input.
Yeah, really, you're exactly right. That was the end of the kind of the text. The rest were just questions or comments is the rest of the matrix. So,
Okay, so are we ready now to move on to those questions of Councilmember Krokoviac? Your light is on. And Councilmember Robinson, did you want to speak?
Yeah, were we gonna continue to go through one at a time, or do you wanna just get comments on these in general?
I like doing things in order. If you guys would rather skip around, that would be okay too.
Well, I'm okay with
Just tell us what number you're looking at.
Well, I was looking at number 15 and 16, the concern about the rezoning for RM24 to RM48. And we heard a comment in the public comment on that. And I haven't gone through and cross-checked every change where it was, the proposal was to go from 24 to 48. But the ones I looked at where I was familiar with it, the 48 would just match the previous county zoning that had been on there. For the ones that have been in Burien from the beginning, actually would match the county zoning that was on there when Burien incorporated. Those areas along Ambon were RM48 before Burien incorporated, and then cut the zoning density in half.
Councilman,
So I was gonna say, it's not like we're, all of a sudden rezoning vast areas to high density. It's a matter in the recently annexed area of keeping the zoning where it is, and in older areas putting it back actually where it was before the city incorporated. And just in very limited areas at that.
which is consistent with what we told folks when we were having meetings in that area, that we would try to match their current zoning as closely as possible to ours. So,
Right.
Councilmember Krokoviac.
Thank you. So I have a question for David. David, is there any upzoning from 24 to 48? I believe there was.
I could check my list, but I think the simple answer is about half or about 100 of the parcels. Again, depends on your frame of reference. We're down zone. We'll just use that for a simple discussion. About half went the other way.
Thank you.
So we have that breakdown.
Thank you. So I still support keeping the zoning as Burien originally intended as it became a city, and keeping it at 24 units per acre as the maximum zoning. Thank you.
Councilmember Edgar.
Thank you. Item number 14, I'd like to keep that one open and come to that a little bit later, at another future meeting.
Okay. Councilmember Robinson, did you want further comments on?
I want to further comment on the RM48 question. The area along Ambon where it was proposed, those properties were zoned RM48 before the city incorporated. They were down zoned, and the proposal now will bring them back up. And most of those properties are already developed at densities higher than the RM2400 density anyway, RM24 density. Anyway, and I'm not sure how many, but I think probably more than half of them are already developed at the higher density, and I don't see any point in maintaining this. When the city incorporated zoning densities, all the RM48 was cut to RM24, and a proposal to bring a few of those back to RM48 does not seem very radical at all to me.
Councilmember Block.
to follow up on Councilmember Robinson's comments. As I pointed out earlier, made a slight mistake when we downzoned in that it removed the financial incentive for property owner to demolish and upgrade their properties. Because if they were to do so, they would be only allowed to rebuild at half the density, so that would take a lot of the economic incentive out of rebuilding. We have to recognize that we have several older multifamily units in Burien that should be replaced, and this basically would maintain the status quo. It wouldn't add any more density to what we already have. What it would do would give an opportunity for a property owner to come in and upgrade, make a better place for people to live rather than patching up what they already have. We saw a very good example of this with the Juanita's apartments back in 2003 and 4 when we had to do an abatement action. It's important to recognize that when we move forward with a zoning downzone, that there are consequences, and we have to recognize that and try to mitigate those whenever possible. So it's not a matter of more apartments, it's a matter of maintaining what we have now and providing an opportunity to upgrade those apartments so people have a better place to live.
And I'm going to agree with Councilmember Robinson and Block on that one. Do we have any comments on any others? Councilmember Edgar.
Thank you. I have a couple questions for clarification. On page 90, which was the last meeting's packet, Table 2, LU 2.1 was countywide growth targets 2006 to 2031. So is my understanding correct then that currently Burien has 4,574 housing capacity, and the target is 4,440 roughly, and so at this point in time we have an excess of about 135 housing units for the time period 2006 to 2031.
Based on our analysis, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's very relevant to the discussion is the targets were were increased, and so this is where we have to consider some of these changes and where is it appropriate to accommodate for the housing. This goes back to the presentation that I kind of showed where the region is growing, and so this is about providing that capacity and that ability to provide for housing. We're in a situation where, based on this analysis method, is that we certainly have sufficient land for growth or jobs. Where we're struggling a little bit is providing sufficient capacity for residential. That's both multifamily and single family. The good news is our downtown is we have a lot of ability to provide that capacity for growth in the downtown next to transit, and these are all good things. The city won an award for some of its planning in the downtown. So those are some of the considerations that went into looking at this land use scenario. It's close.
Okay, thank you. And there's a small item on the top of the table where the information that had been inserted. On the second line, it says in parentheses countywide growth targets 2006 to 2013. I think that means it should be 31.
Oh, yes. No. Yeah. I see. Thank you.
And then another clarification I have is on page 121, and it has to do with groundwater. On policy EV 5.4, the policies to protect groundwater sources from contamination by requiring pollution sources, controls, and stormwater pretreatment. Could you provide an example of what pretreatment would be for stormwater?
I don't want to guess. I think I'll have to get back to you on that, because I have an idea, but I want to make sure I'm correct.
And then the same thing down on policy EV 5.6. It says when considering new or modified ground, it says groundwater policies, but I think it means policies. The city should evaluate cost of implementation. Where would an individual locate those groundwater policies? Is that in a separate document, or
There
could there be a reference?
might be in the stormwater master plan.
Okay, so it might help if there's a pointer to that.
Okay, I'll look to see if there's an appropriate source.
And then I found a couple other little minor technical things, but I'll get those to you.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Okay, council members, did you want to comment on anything from 10 through 14? Nobody said anything about those. Okay. So are we okay with that, Mr. Johansson?
Yes, I think our next step, just to check in, our next step would be the public hearing. We'll keep the matrix, we'll add to it. I'm assuming there's not a need to come back with these few items, that their next major step is the public hearing.
Do we want to give the council members who are not here an opportunity to weigh in, or do we want to go straight to the public hearing? What's the pleasure of you folks?
So just clarification that the matrix that we're working on will pretty much remain the same with further comments from
Correct.
tonight. And so the next time we'll see this is with the public hearing, and then we'll just continue the discussion with the full council at that time.
Councilmember Edgar, did you have a comment?
Yes, the last comment just made another kind of picture in my mind on the public hearing. So on public hearing, we originally were talking about the upzoning concerns, but it sounds like this whole document may be part of that public hearing.
If that's how the council would like us to notify it.
I was under the impression it was just a portion of those concerns that were originally addressed or brought forward last week.
It would, by necessity, be of the entire document, but I think council wanted to make sure that people who had their properties affected positively or negatively in particular, were notified.
Okay, well, I think that's, from my perspective, that's a paramount issue for those people that are directly affected, that they get notified.
But I don't think we're saying that we will stop anybody from commenting on any other part of
Okay.
the document.
I think it's just how we prepare the notice. Do we want to emphasize the zoning component? Do we want to emphasize the whole comprehensive plan? Yeah, okay.
But in direct answer to your question, they would be able to comment on it.
Okay. Then I have a process question with regard to public hearings. Typically, when we've had, or I've seen public hearings in the past, after the comment period, the council went into a motion to adopt or reject or make changes. Is that going to be expected outcome at the end of that public hearing, or are we?
The council's option, you could do that if council decided to, but there's no requirement that you do so.
Okay.
Councilmember Edgar, there have been times when we have taken action right away like that, and there have been times when we have deliberately said that we wanted to take action at a subsequent council meeting to give people time to digest what was said at the meeting. Councilmember Lewis.
Yeah, I wanted to say with two council members absent, I would like to have this go back on our agenda for January 14th so we can, and there's enough, we've got two council members absent, and there's enough things that we're looking at massaging from the original amendments that I would like to get another look at those also before we get into the public hearing.
And I would agree with that.
So what we're hearing then is that you want to look at these again at least once prior to the public hearing, which we expect to have, we said,
January.
Okay, we can do it.
Okay, so we move on to item C, which is a discussion of ordinance 572 relating to regulations of chronic nuisance properties. And is this correct?
Thank you, Mayor, or Deputy Mayor and council members. This item had been on your council agenda a couple meetings back, and we ran out of time to consider it due to the length of the meeting. And then Councilmember Robinson had mentioned some concerns he had about this proposed ordinance to me, and so I've discussed those with him, and also Chief Kimmer has participated in that discussion as well. Chief Kimmer is going to join me here in case you have some additional questions tonight. This ordinance is a tool, an enforcement tool that a number of cities in our state and across the country have started to adopt. It allows us to deal with properties where there have been a number of nuisance or criminal activities occurring within a relatively short time. What this ordinance proposes is 3 such activities within a 2-month period. And what the ordinance would do is allow the chief of police or his designee to meet with or to notify the property owner where these activities are occurring and work out an agreement as to how to solve the problems that are leading to that type of activity. An example of where this might have been useful was, if the council may recall, the Wallong establishment a year or so ago. We were relying on the Liquor Control Board to deal with problems that were occurring there, whereas we didn't have a lot of control. We had input into their process, but this type of ordinance would allow us to act where another agency may not feel so inclined to act. So that's a summary of the ordinance. I don't know if Chief Kimmer would like to address it. He had become aware of a few other neighboring cities that adopted this type of ordinance and thought that it would be a useful tool for Burien to have as well.
Deputy Mayor Clark, members of the council. There we go. Okay, now it's on. Deputy Mayor Clark, members of the council. This is something that comes up and has come up in my tenure here very few times, but it is something that is a quality of life issue for neighborhoods, and there are limited remedies to deal with these issues. You may recall, some of you, of a property that we had squatters in. We had people, there was a homeowner, and there were people coming and going, and as a result we had chronic problems in the neighborhood of thefts and just, again, quality of life issues that were very disruptive. So this is something that I think would be used very sparingly. It's not, not meant to be the hammer. It's meant to be trying to get compliance from these, neighbors that aren't helping their neighborhood. And this is also residences and businesses. And so it's just something that I think that it's worth having in our ability to do this, but I don't see it as being something that we are going to be doing a great deal.
Okay, Councilmember Block.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I don't know how many times we've had people sit here and, stand there and ask us to do something about a problem in their neighborhood. And this is an opportunity for us to do something. I'm happy adopting this tonight. The sooner we adopt it, the sooner the city attorney and the police department can move forward with following through and taking care of some of these problems.
Councilmember Robinson.
Yes, I've been over the ordinance. I discussed it with the city attorney and the police chief, and I've worked with people and represented people on both sides of these kind of issues. People that the neighbors were complaining about, people that had bad neighbors that they were complaining about. I'm not a big fan of ordinances that give the city, more power to tell you how to live. On the other hand, this ordinance strikes a pretty good balance. seeking voluntary compliance for somebody that just doesn't get the message initially. It gives the city a way to give someone a kind of a wake-up call and say, you've got to fix this or you're going to be in trouble. And then a way to enforce it if it doesn't get fixed. I was somewhat bothered at first about the very range of the things that are included as predicates of someone's carrying on stalking or harassment on the property, if there's domestic violence. After discussing it with the police chief and the city attorney, I'm satisfied with the way it's written, and I would favor approving it tonight. I'll vote for it.
Are there any other comments? I would favor approving it tonight also. The suggested motion is for December 3rd. However, we won't have all of our council members back at that time either. So, if we're in agreement then, I would entertain a motion.
Thank you. I move to adopt ordinance number 572, regulating chronic nuisance properties.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 572. Please register your votes. And it passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so we move to item D, a discussion on ordinance number 576 relating to the D&O tax amendments.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor and council members. Joining me now is Finance Director Kim Kraus, who has been working with me in preparing this ordinances before you tonight. It's amendments to the city's B&O tax ordinance. As the agenda bill on page 61 tries to explain, there's basically three major amendments that we're trying to accomplish here. Two of them are what we've described as mandatory, which means that under the state law, we have to include these new provisions in our B&O tax ordinance. And one of those two is amending the definition section of the ordinance to describe digital goods, which are goods that are transmitted electronically, such as books, music, videos. And then the second mandatory change is to delete a provision that applies specifically to companies that contract with the city. Rather than having a specific provision dealing with them, they'll be dealt with the same as any other companies that are subject to the B&O tax. Basically, both of those provisions, the effect of them is to provide, is to subject them to section 077 in the ordinance, which is the allocation and apportionment section. And that's, so it's not changing or it's not increasing the taxes that companies are subject to paying, but it just defines more specifically how the taxes are allocated among different jurisdictions. So with regard to digital goods, you'll see in that section of the ordinance, there's different criteria that apply as to where the taxes are considered to be, or where the goods are considered to be delivered, and then that dictates where the tax revenue goes. And in talking to Microflex, which is the local company that we contract with to administer our B&O tax, they don't see that for Burien there will be much of an effect based on this change. That we're not going to see a lot of B&O tax revenue from digital goods. It'll be mostly in the places where companies like Amazon do most of their business. The third change that is in the ordinance is with regard to confidentiality. We already have a confidentiality provision in our B&O tax ordinance. What this change does is just clarify that there's certain state and federal agencies and the courts that we're allowed to provide tax information to and not violate the confidentiality provisions. So this ordinance is something that doesn't really have significant changes to our B&O tax structure during the budget process. Kim has explained to you, the reliance that the city has on B&O tax revenue in our budget. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add, Kim?
I don't. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Oh, one other thing I should mention, though, is that in addition to those provisions that I described, the effective date of this ordinance is January 1st of 2013, and that's something else that's mandatory. There's 40 cities in our state that have the B&O tax ordinance, and we're required to basically move in lockstep with each other so that the business community knows what the regulations are at any given time that they have to deal with throughout the state.
Okay, Councilmember Rosen.
I just wanted to ask one question to clarify. If we don't adopt these changes, then we're not allowed to collect the tax anymore?
I think that's correct. There might be an argument that we could still do it, but we'd be subject to challenge from businesses that could be adversely affected by us not adopting the changes. As I indicated, a couple of these are considered mandatory. And the reason why they're mandatory is because the business community has lobbied the legislature very hard to have consistency among all of the B&O tax cities with regard to these regulations. And the Association of Washington Cities, which drafted the model tax ordinance changes to be consistent with the state law, takes that concern of the legislature and the business community very seriously, and so they pushed the cities very hard to get this to our councils in a timely manner so that we can get it adopted by January 1st.
Well, it's a legitimate concern. We don't have to figure out a different set of laws every place you do business. Especially as we get into more complicated schemes here with digital sales for trying to figure out where the taxes go. I wanted to clarify that this is a uniform law, and if we don't buy into it, we don't get to use it, basically.
I think that's basically correct.
Councilmember Edgar.
Thank you. Just to clarify what I thought I heard you say, that this change, which is essentially administrative in nature,
Yes.
will not have much of an impact on the amount of taxes that we will collect in the future.
That's correct.
The only thing that might change that might be more businesses coming into the city. Just right now.
And seeing no other lights, I favor passing this tonight, or having a motion on this tonight again, because of the time sensitiveness of this.
And I would ask us to do what we usually do, and we have a couple more meetings before the end of the year, so putting it on the consent agenda for our December 3rd meeting is what I'm comfortable with.
Okay, folks, what's our pleasure?
I'm okay with that.
With the consent agenda?
Yeah, it seems to be consensus, so.
Okay, so then this goes on the consent agenda. We only have one, no, we have a couple more.
Yeah, so we'll put it on the December 3rd council meeting consent agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we are down to our favorite topic, review of proposed council schedule. So do, Councilmember Block.
Oh,
Well, you have your other light on for some reason.
down.
Okay, Councilmember Edgar then.
Thank you. For the November 26th study session, we're proposed to have discussion on council policies and procedures. I did some preliminary review of those. There was one Exhibit A is addressed on page 52, that's not attached, so I would like, if possible, to have that included in the packet for that next meeting.
We'll make sure that's
Okay. And then the other question I had is on the December, January. Item number 1 says action on the 2012 comprehensive plan amendments. Is that different than just continued discussion?
Yeah, that's just kind of a placeholder, and we move that as we take production for council, so we do tonight. So we'll review the tape tomorrow, and whatever it is you told us to do in regards to bringing this item back to you, we'll bring it in that fashion, and we'll update the calendar.
So there's still more discussion to come.
Yes. And that's a great example of an item that is kind of evolving, and we just keep moving as council and production for council.
Okay, do we have any other comments? Okay. So we're not having a retreat in December, right?
That's correct.
So we don't need to worry about that.
I usually have one follow-on. So then the staff will take a look at the proposed agenda and remove the items that we voted on tonight.
Yeah, we'll update the agenda to reflect whatever you proposed to tonight.
Okay, seeing no further comments, then we're ready for city business.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. Madam Mayor, I move that City of Burien withdraws with appropriate notice to the Matter Review Board designation of Area Y North Highline as a potential annexation area.
It has been moved and seconded that we do that. I'm going to point out that we usually don't take quick action like this when we do not have a full council present.
All due respect to the council members that aren't here because of their vacation schedules, city business moves on. I'd like to speak on my motion.
Before you speak, I also want to point out that this is not a time-sensitive issue. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. You know, we've had a recent proposal in North Highline that basically has torn our community apart. And that proposal was rejected by the residents of North Highline by a 2-1 margin. It's time to bring our community, our city, the city of Burien back together. And annexation has been like a malignant tumor in our community. And it's time for us to remove that tumor and get back to taking care of Burien itself. So this is going to be the first of 3 motions that I'm going to make. The first motion will be to remove the problem. The second will be to bring the community together. And the third will be to demonstrate to the residents of Burien that the city's focused as return to Burien. So with that, I hope that it will be voted up and approved. Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
Well, first off, the annexation was rejected 2-1. I don't believe it was a rejection of Burien as much as just a rejection of being annexed into any place and a reaction to a very, very active Vote No campaign up there, which put on a major effort in the last 2 weeks before the election. I disagree with the characterization of it tearing the community apart. We had a small number of people who were very vociferous, but that was not all. I did not get any large upswell from citizens of Burien, and I certainly never took my focus off the city of Burien. My belief that annexing that area is necessary for the future of Burien is based on my concern for the city of Burien. But I do find it offensive that something like this is brought up in a divided council, when we have 2 members absent, this is brought up out of the blue, and wants to pursue sudden action on it. And I believe it's an abuse, and I am strongly opposed to it. I believe that any such action should wait until we have a full council present.
Councilmember Block?
All due respect to Councilmember Robinson, I want to remind Councilmember Robinson that he made his motion to designate North Highline as a potential annexation area from the floor. So this is pretty much moving the same vein that you move forward with pushing annexation.
And I believe that was with a full council present.
Several times at different council meetings, I have pointed out that actions that are taken by some council members causes division among the council members. And I have expressed concern about those behaviors. When you put forth something that is kind of behind the backs of 2 council members who are not here, it was well known that they were not going to be here tonight. It is well known that there is no urgency with this matter. This is not an effort that is geared to good council relationships among ourselves, as far as the idea that that our community has been torn apart by this. I will totally disagree. I remember we had a survey, and the survey indicated something in the neighborhood of 3% of the existing Burien community was concerned about annexation. I will agree with you that there were a repetitive small number of people that spoke against annexation, and I am going to state flat out that there was a lot of misinformation there, such as the fact that the city said time and again that the taxes of people in the proposed annexation area would go up by $140. The anti-annexation people said we were liars. Consistently and constantly at public meetings, we were called liars because they said those taxes were going to go up $400. Where did they get the $400 figure? That answer was given to a reporter when they said they were assuming different taxes that Burien might choose to impose over the next several years. I defy anybody sitting here on council, anybody sitting in the audience, any staff person, to tell us what taxes we might impose in the next few years. Yet a dollar figure was put to that, and it was published to the community in the North Highline area. If you want to talk about divisiveness, that's where it comes from. It's actions like that, and actions like this at a council meeting when 2 members are absent only exacerbates that. So I totally disapprove of this action and would encourage council members to wait until we have a full council before we have such a heavy discussion. You are showing extreme disrespect to the full council, Councilmember Block, and I am terribly disappointed. We have stood before students and talked to students about their leadership, including everybody, working together, teamwork. Explain to me, where is that right now?
Councilmember Clark, I've called for the question. I believe you're out of order.
All right. Register your votes. Unfortunately, the minority on the council tonight has chosen to ignore their absent members and has passed this.
Madam Deputy Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. Madam Deputy Mayor, I move that at the April 2013 special election, the citizens of Burien shall be given an opportunity to choose between a mayor council form of government or city manager form of government.
At this point in time, I'm going to recess the meeting, and I am leaving my seat. I am not going to sit here and chair a meeting where we so flagrantly disregard the protocols that we have instituted in times past. So right now, this meeting is recessed.